Securities Limited, and you're watching CBX.
The time by Kyrie Chris is 6 p.m. Time for CBX Business News. The Business News headlines is brought to you by CBX Wealth Management, making more possible. Market caution, trade clashes in the Caribbean, and a shifting outlook from the U.S. Federal Reserve. Hello and welcome to CBX Business News for Thursday, June 19, 2025. I'm Unil Wood. Thanks for joining us. Coming up in the newscast locally, Morgan Stanley's Global Investment Committee urges investors to proceed with caution, pointing to elevated U.S. policy uncertainty and geopolitical stresses. On the regional front, St. Vincent and the Grenadines' Prime Minister blasts CARICOM trade inequities and foreign exchange barriers as OECS demands fairness from regional powerhouses. And over on the global stage, the U.S. Federal Reserve holds interest rates steady at 4.25 to 4.50% for a third consecutive meeting, while signaling two possible cuts by year-end. Stay tuned as we unpack these stories right after the break.
Wealth is not simply counted in dollars or cents, but in the time we spend with love, in love, giving love. Wealth is not simply a means to an end. It is the means to live out loud. Wealth is more than money. It's about family, the memories you create, the legacy you leave behind, and your ability to enjoy life in the moment. It's also about seeing the CBX possibilities and seizing investment opportunities to achieve the future you want and deserve. Which is why CBX Wealth will focus on your investments so you can experience more. Because true wealth is truly more. To start investing today, call 876-926-7767.
The local news is brought to you by Derriman Trading, better from the start. Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean flavors and fragrances, tease the senses, and Pulse Investments. Welcome back to CBX Business News. We begin with news in investment. Global investors are being strongly advised to adopt a cautious approach in the face of limited market visibility and persistent uncertainties. Key concerns include elevated policy unpredictability, intensifying geopolitical tensions, potential weakening in the U.S. labor market, and growing pressure on corporate profit margins. Chief Investment Officer, CIO, and Head of Global Investment Office at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, Lisa Chalet, has outlined the reasons behind our company's Global Investment Committee's strong recommendation for investors to remain highly cautious in today's market environment.
The recovery from the April bear market has been nothing short of stunning. Examining the recent retracement suggests that technical momentum, better financial conditions, and normalized implied volatility have sustained the recent rally. Investor sentiment indicates plenty of room for equities to continue to climb the proverbial wall of worry, and market leadership factor composition shows a tilt towards economic reacceleration and upside surprises. While we do respect these technical market dynamics, we're having trouble getting comfortable with this backdrop overall, given that there's been almost no resolution on major points of uncertainty.
Other concerns highlighted by the Morgan Stanley CIO include the absence of significant U.S. trade agreements and downgraded global economic growth forecasts from both the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank.
That roughly 60 days into the 90-day tariff pause, the U.S. has no major trade deals. Recent talks with China on the rare earth exports amounted to nothing more than an agreement to agree about the already existing framework of the Geneva talks established a month ago. And regarding tax policy and the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, uncertainty also reigns, with resolution appearing unlikely until August. In addition, it seems that geopolitical risks are insufficiently discounted. Consider that the IMF and the World Bank both recently reduced their forecasts for global growth, citing not only trade disruptions, but a slowing U.S. economy. As for global stability, in addition to the Israel-Hamas war, there has now been confrontation between Israel and Iran.
In light of these factors, Ms. Chalet says her company's Global Investment Committee offers clear guidance on how investors should navigate the current environment.
Considering all these factors, even as we recognize that the bull case we talked about last week may be plausible, for now we're continuing to proceed with caution. As risk managers first, we're hedging with a focus on reliable dividends and cash flows. Investors should consider active stock picking versus relying only on the passive index. Position portfolios for average U.S. equity returns around 5 to 10% this year in an environment of more volatility, higher real rates, and a weaker U.S. dollar. Look to diversify with international equities, commodities, and hedge funds. Energy and energy infrastructure are a favored tactical long recommendation. Lastly, staying overweight in short to neutral duration investment grade and municipal bonds still makes a lot of sense to us.
Chief Investment Officer at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, Lisa Chalet. Turning now from global investment concerns to a bright spot in Jamaica's economy, cruise tourism. With cruise passengers accounting for a significant number of tourists to the island, the Ministry of Tourism is targeting an increase in this subsector of the travel industry. Having secured a landmark 1.2 million cruise passengers in 2024, Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett says through the Jamaica Vacations Limited JAMVAC, a public body of the ministry, they will work with global partners to expand cruise tourism offerings that benefit locals directly, from new cruise village projects to craft and cultural showcases that demonstrate authentic Jamaican creativity. He noted that visitors traveled to the island on ships operated by various leading cruise lines, including inaugural visits from prestigious vessels like Disney Treasure and Celebrity Ascent. Unlocking the power of cruise tourism is one of 15 strategic pillars that Minister Bartlett revealed to Parliament in his sectoral debate presentation on Tuesday to guide the ministry's work in the 2025-2026 fiscal year. He also mentioned that there has been a series of seminars with over 230 manufacturers coming together to explore creating a tourism supply logistics center. The minister has informed that the center will ensure that the supply needs are met. Underscoring the importance of this proposal, Minister Bartlett pointed out that the wealth of tourism is in the supply side, and there is a need to understand that it is the consumption pattern of the visitor that has to be met. And once that is met, then the wealth stays in the destination. In other news, the Limners and Bards, the lab, has reported a 3.3% increase in revenue, amounting to $460.2 million for the 6-month period ended April 30, 2025, compared to the corresponding period in 2024. In its unaudited consolidated financial statements for the period, the lab says this growth was driven primarily by increased activity in the production and media business segments. Media contributed $240.7 million, followed by production at $151.8 million, and agency at $67.5 million. Meanwhile, gross profit amounted to $175.4 million, reflecting a 2.7% decline year over year due to a higher proportion of revenue being derived from media, which typically carries lower margins relative to the agency segment. The lab says this shift in revenue mix also resulted in a 2% decline in the company's net profit margin. Now, net profit for the 6-month period stood at $20.6 million, a 58.3% decline compared to the same period in the prior year. The decrease was primarily attributable to lower gross margins and a reduction in the second quarter revenue, largely due to seasonal variations and the timing of project deliveries. The lab's total assets amounted to $1.03 billion, reflecting a decrease of $11.2 million or 1.1%, mainly attributable to normal depreciation. Earnings per share for the 6 months ended April 30 was 2 cents when compared to the EPS of 5 cents for the comparable period. And now for news from the Bank of Jamaica on how the currency markets traded today. At the end of currency trading, the US dollar is selling for $160.61, the Canadian for $119.52, and the pound will go for $216.36, while $184.67 is the going rate for the euro. Now for news from the JSE on how the local equities market traded today. 103 stocks traded on the JSE, of which 36 advanced, 45 declined, and 22 traded firm. Leading the winners were First Rock Real Estate Investments US dollar, JFP Limited, Main Event Entertainment Group, and Regency Petroleum. While leading the losers were Medical Disposables and Supplies, A.S. Bryden & Sons Holdings US dollar, Caribbean Cream, and Sagicor Real Estate X Fund Limited. The main index declined by 935.66 points or 0.30% to close at 310,119.74. The junior market index also declined, but by 20.74 or 0.62% to close at 3,336.55. And in company news, Productive Business Solutions has declared the following dividend payments to the perpetual cumulative redeemable preference shareholders on record as of June 16 and payable on June 30. To the 9.25% perpetual cumulative redeemable preference shareholders, a dividend of US $0.23125 per share, and to the 10.50% perpetual cumulative redeemable preference shareholders, a dividend of Jamaican $25.890411 per share. And it's time for Market Education Feature, brought to you by CariCris, Regional Ratings, Global Standard. In our Market Education Feature for Wednesday, we looked at the term Sunrise Industries. Today, we turn our focus to the other end of the spectrum as we defined sunset industries. A sunset industry refers to a mature, well-established sector that is in decline, often due to shrinking market demand, outdated technology, or shifting consumer preferences. These industries typically show minimal or no organic growth, resulting in reduced profitability and falling profit margins. Their decline is largely driven by a lack of innovation, stagnant sector performance, limited new product development, and exposure to market vulnerabilities. Now, with new opportunities for transformation, whether in market trends, customer behavior, or technological advancement, sunset industries struggle to remain competitive. As a result, they face increasing challenges in maintaining productivity and cost efficiency in a rapidly evolving business environment. The Market Education Feature was brought to you by CariCris, Regional Ratings, Global Standards. And that's it for Market Education feature and the end of the local segment. Please stay with us. The regional business news is up next. The local news is brought to you by Derriman Trading, better from the start. Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean flavors and fragrances, tease the senses. And Pulse Investments. Welcome back, and now for the regional business news. Incoming chair of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS, and Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, is calling for urgent reform within the Caribbean community's CARICOM trade and financial architecture, accusing the bloc of systemic imbalances that continue to disadvantage smaller economies, particularly those in the OECS. In a wide-ranging statement at the opening ceremony of the 77th meeting of the OECS Authority on Tuesday, the Vincentian leader criticized what he described as long-standing structural inequities that favor larger CARICOM members, chief among them Trinidad and Tobago. He argued that Trinidad's cheaper energy inputs and manufacturing base have given it a dominant and at times unfair advantage in intra-regional trade.
It is evident that the trading arrangements of CARICOM have benefited the member states with a larger territorial and economic base, particularly in respect of manufacturing commodities. And the comparatively cheaper energy resource in Trinidad and Tobago has additionally made that country's manufacturing sector the uneven beneficiary from CARICOM's trade in commodities.
Gonsalves pointed to Article 164 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas as the only safeguard protecting vulnerable OECS industries like flour production.
That without a special protection offered through Article 164 of the CARICOM Treaty to the production of flour in the OECS, our Eastern Caribbean flour mills in St. Vincent and the Grenadines' very existence would be in grave jeopardy.
Beyond trade rules, the incoming OECS chair blasted Trinidad and Tobago's foreign exchange controls, saying they have virtually collapsed St. Vincent's US $12 to $15 million agricultural export trade with Port of Spain.
The foreign exchange control arrangements in Trinidad and Tobago have conspired to reduce to near nothingness a hitherto US $12 to $15 million annual trade in agricultural exports from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This injustice has caused manifest material difficulties to farmers and agro-traders in my country. Our country pays Trinidad and Tobago annually in excess of US $65 million. We pay in hard foreign currency for visible exports from Trinidad, mainly petroleum products and manufactured goods. But our sister CARICOM country cannot find less than a miserly $4 million US in foreign exchange to pay for our agricultural products.
Incoming OECS chair and Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves. The Caribbean Community CARICOM is set to implement sweeping trade reforms aimed at deepening economic integration and stimulating regional production following high-level agreement on updated rules of origin and a revised Common External Tariff, CET. At the heart of these efforts is the drive to expand intra-regional trade, long considered the engine of the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, CSME. Assistant Secretary General for the CARICOM Single Market and Trade, Ambassador Wayne McCook, says the modernized rules of origin will better reflect how goods are produced within the region, making it easier for manufacturers and exporters to qualify for duty-free access under the CSME.
The rules of origin are the rules that tell us when a particular product made within the Caribbean Community Single Market qualifies for duty-free treatment. What gives value to that duty-free treatment, or further value, is the fact that we maintain a common external tariff. And the common external tariff review was intended to look again at the ways in which we structure the CET, or the common external tariff, to support regional development.
Ambassador McCook says the revised Common External Tariff will enter into force in January 2026, following a decision by CARICOM's Council for Trade and Economic Development, COTED.
This COTED decided that the implementation of the work on the updated CET regime would begin in January of 2026. So that was a decision that this COTED took. So we are now preparing to put that into effect. On the rules of origin, there are one or two outstanding rules that the member states needed to agree on, and this COTED was able to successfully agree on the outstanding ones. So we are now ready to move ahead to implement the new rules of origin to support regional industry.
In other news, Haiti is ramping up efforts to stimulate private investment and strengthen national production through a series of new fiscal incentives under the 2024-2025 amending budget. In a notice issued June 16, Minister of Economy and Finance Alfred Metelu outlined expanded tax and customs benefits designed to encourage business activity, job creation, and export growth. Among the key changes, companies investing in renovation, re-equipment, or expansion will now benefit from unlimited tax and customs exemptions on imported equipment and raw materials. Export-oriented businesses will also continue to enjoy full exemptions, while agricultural firms and cooperatives have seen their exemption period extended from 7 to 10 years. The same 10-year benefit now applies to craft businesses, domestic manufacturers, and free zone developers, up from previous limits of 5 to 7 years. And in a direct boost to local producers, excise duties on alcoholic beverages and energy drinks made in Haiti have been sharply reduced, while remaining high for imports, a clear signal of stronger protection for the domestic industry. The government says these incentives aim to build investor confidence, boost production capacity, and accelerate economic recovery. Businesses are being urged to take advantage of the revised benefits now in force. And there was no trading today on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange as the country is observing two public holidays, Corpus Christi and Labor Day. As a result, the market activity was suspended for the day and is expected to resume on the next official trading session. And we take a short break, but please do stay with us. The international news segment with Rondine Williams is up next.
Welcome back to CBX Business News. In international news, the Federal Reserve has taken the decision to hold the federal fund rate steady at 4.25% to 4.50% for the fourth consecutive meeting. The decision reflects a cautious approach as policymakers assess the economic effects of President Donald Trump's policy, including tariffs, immigration, and tax measures. Despite uncertainties, the Fed still projects 2 rate cuts before year-end, though it anticipates only quarter percentage point in 2026 and 2027. In its updated projection, the Fed downgraded its GDP growth forecast for 2025 to 1.4% from 1.7% in March, and for 2026 to 1.6%, down from 1.8%, while leaving the 2027 estimate unchanged at 1.8%. The unemployment rate is now expected at 4.5% in both 2025 and 2026, when compared to previous projections of 4.4% and 4.3%, respectively. As for inflation, the Fed sees the PCE rate at 3.0% in 2025, easing to 2.4% in 2026, and 2.1% in 2027. Over in the United Kingdom, the Bank of England has also chosen to hold the interest rates unchanged at 4.25% in its June meeting. In a 6-3 vote, the central bank resisted growing calls for a rate cut, citing persistent inflation and geopolitical uncertainty. 3 members favored a 0.25 percentage cut to 4%, though investors had expected a 7-2 split. The central bank noted that consumer price inflation is likely to remain broadly at current rates for the rest of the year before easing back towards the target next year. However, it warned of the two-sided risk to inflation, expressing concern over rising energy prices amid the escalating Middle Eastern conflict and potential trade disruptions from proposed U.S. tariffs. It also noted that underlying UK GDP growth appears to have remained weak, while the labor market has continued to loosen. Still, in light of the broader outlook and ongoing disinflation, the bank affirms that a gradual and cautious approach to the further withdrawal of monetary policies restraint remains appropriate. And while the central banks remain cautious, investor sentiment is clearly shifting with notable moves in both equity and commodity markets. Shares in Berkshire Hathaway Incorporated plunged more than 10% this week, one of the steepest drops in recent memory, as Warren Buffett announced he will step down as CEO by year's end. The news marks the fading of famed Buffett premium, long seen as a value booster for the company. Buffett, who has led Berkshire for over 6 decades, confirmed during the company's annual meeting in May that he will transition out of the CEO role while remaining as chairman. However, since the announcement, the company's stocks has underperformed the S&P 500 by 15 percentage points. First quarter operating earnings also fell by 14% to $9.64 billion, deepening investor concerns. And despite the market jitters, some analysts remain optimistic. Greg Abels, Buffett's handpicked successor, is widely respected within the company and among investors. Abel has been deeply involved in operation for years, said another analyst, and while the transition is significant, the fundamentals of Berkshire remains strong. And as equities react to leadership shifts, commodity markets are responding to growing geopolitical risks. WTI crude oil futures surged past $77 per barrel on Thursday, reaching their highest level in 5 months amid escalating geopolitical tension in the Middle East that threaten energy supplies from the region. The conflict between Israel and Iran intensified, with Tel Aviv reportedly targeting Iranian nuclear facilities, heightening fears of a broader regional escalation. These concerns were further amplified after US President Donald Trump adopted a hawkish stance towards Iran, signaling potential American involvement a move that could disrupt global oil flows, particularly through the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, the US dollar remained under pressure, holding on to losses sustained earlier in the quarter. Investor uncertainty surrounding US economic policies have led to a shift away from the dollar-dominated assets, providing additional support for commodities priced in the greenback. And that's it for the international segment of the newscast. Please do stay with us. The news recap is on the other side of the break.
Welcome back, and now to recap our top stories making today's CBX Evening News. Morgan Stanley urges caution amid U.S. policy uncertainty and geopolitical risks. Regionally, St. Vincent and the Grenadines' Prime Minister renews calls for trade equity and financial justice in CARICOM. And on the international scene, U.S. Fed holds rates at 4.25 to 4.5%, signals 2 cuts by year-end. Those were the stories making today's CBX Evening News. On behalf of Rondine Williams and the entire production team, I'm Yanil Wood, thanking you for watching CBX, your region, your business, your source.
The Caribbean Business Exchange now presents a regional feature, BOJ's Centrally Speaking. Do enjoy.
Welcome back to another program of Centrally Speaking.
Centrally Speaking is a program that opens up the conversation around important matters of economics and finance, matters of national importance that have an impact on your life. I'm Sheena.
And I'm Anna. Glad you could join us again, and welcome aboard to those of you who are joining for the very first time. We invite you to stay with us.
We have a very great show lined up for you today because in today's program, we will again be speaking with Bank of Jamaica's Deputy Governor, George Roper.
All right, so if you remember, George is a Deputy Governor with responsibility for finance, technology, and administration.
But before we hear from George Roper, we want to hear from you in the streets. It's time for Street Check.
Check, check.
What is the role of the Bank of Jamaica? All right, so the role of the Bank of Jamaica is, basically to help the Jamaica government as it relates to issues that relates to inflation. So for example, they would help in controlling the interest rate and also advise the public on what is really going on in the economy, in terms of our debt to income ratio.
My understanding of the Bank of Jamaica is to oversee the different banks, whether it's commercial in the country, as well as to monitor or keep the interest rate of the country on a stable path.
Basically, it is a central bank of the country. Basically, provide guidelines and procedure for the other banks.
Simply put, is basically to govern the finances of the country, based on my limited understanding.
Their role is to regularize or regulate the money that goes in and out of bank accounts. Not only bank accounts, but like overall the spending of money in Jamaica.
Well, it's the oversight body for the commercial banks, for example, and they are the governing body in Jamaica that oversees, makes the different regulation regarding the financial sector.
And thank you for your responses, my peeps. I see you're in the know.
They certainly are. And our guest, Deputy Governor George Roper, will put us further in the know. George, welcome to Centrally Speaking.
Thanks, Sheena. Thanks, Anna. Good to be here.
It's good to have you.
So BOJ are going with big things.
Always.
All right. One of those big things is the expansion of the Bank of Jamaica's plant and premises. Right. All right. So the headquarters first, under the Soul Place. There's planned expansion at that space. Talk to us about that.
Okay, great. So a lot of people have been asking, well, why? And I think there are really two primary pain points.
Right.
That exist right now in relation to our current facilities.
Yeah.
First of all, before the COVID-19 pandemic, we had done a spatial audit. And when we looked at what our complement was going to grow to, or staff complement, and in the actual space we had, there was a gap, and it was a significant gap. Over the course of the pandemic, we continued to add staff. And so now this has become a bit of a chronic situation. During the pandemic, actually, we probably got a little bit of a break because a lot of people had to work from home. But now, you know, we want staff coming in on a regular basis. That's good for cohesion within the team, to have people working here, and then for new staff as well, for them to get that connection. It's hard for them to get that kind of connection with the organization if they're primarily working from home.
Right.
And so, you know, the lack of space was a pain point. The other thing that was a pain point, which is kind of connected to the pandemic too, is that parking is a problem in downtown Kingston. We suffer from parking issues here, and I think those have been aggravated by the fact that we've grown over the period of the pandemic. Why are we growing? We're growing because new mandates, new responsibilities, new functions. One of those things that is around the corner is Twin Peaks.
Right.
I personally don't like calling the expansion the building of a new tower. Because when you hear tower and you hear Twin Peaks, then there's an association with Twin Towers.
Right.
And we're trying to actually get away from that kind of an association. It's really an expansion of our primary location that we're doing. But we are going to grow a bit because of Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks involves us giving up some of our supervisory responsibilities in terms of conduct, and then taking on more responsibilities in terms of prudential supervision of insurance companies, securities dealers. On a net basis, there's going to be growth when Twin Peaks lands. So that's an example, just one example of anticipated growth.
So George, my question is two-pronged. I want you to share with us the estimated cost of this expansion. And secondly, I want you to tell us some of the long-term value in terms of this investment.
Jamaica has only one central bank. The kind of functions that we carry out are very unique. Nobody else in the country issues and redeems the currency of the country. We are the government's banker. We are the banker for commercial banks. We also manage the country's international reserves. And of course, our primary mandate, I've just mentioned a few functions. Our primary mandate is to promote price stability and financial system stability. Without price stability and financial system stability, it's very hard for a country to have sustained economic growth and development. So if we start with what the central bank is required to do, it's very important. It's important that you have the proper facilities to be able to do what we do in a way that has regard for occupational health and safety.
Okay.
The most important asset that the bank has is the employees.
Yeah.
And we want them to be able to do what they need to do in a certain level of comfort, and certainly in an environment that is welcoming, and of course, it's healthy and safe for them to do all the things that they have to do.
Okay.
To ensure that the country has an effective central bank.
Okay. And the estimated value?
Estimated value. So this is going to be a multi-year project. We have just gotten the approval of cabinet to engage with a consulting firm.
Okay.
That is going to help us with a lot of the work that has to be done pre-construction and even post-construction. And there's a lot of work to be done. There are architectural drawings to be done, mechanical and engineering drawings to be done. There are approvals to be obtained. And at the central bank, we don't build buildings every week.
Yeah.
So we need professionals to help us and guide us through that process. And so we went to doing procurement through international competitive bidding. 10 bids were obtained, 3 of them from foreign bidders, 7 local, and I'm happy to say that the award went to a local firm.
Oh,
and
okay.
It's a local firm with a lot of experience in large construction projects. They've worked in Jamaica and they've worked in other countries in the region, and I expect that we'll get high quality value from the procurement, and they'll help us through that process. Now, potentially, we're looking at a building that's going to be 10 stories, and based on what we're contemplating in terms of the actual square footage, the actual cost of the construction, if you look on current, what currently a square foot is in the construction trade is costing builders and developers, we're looking at potentially $2 billion Jamaican dollars.
Okay.
Okay.
But it's a big figure. It's a substantial figure. But I should point out that the assets on the bank's balance sheet have been over $1.1 trillion.
Okay.
So you need to put that $2 billion against the total size of the bank's balance sheet.
So you have money.
Huh?
So we have money.
We are a central bank, so the size of our central bank's balance sheet is going to be reflective of the scale, the scope and the scale of economic activity in our country.
So George, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the expansion and potential displacement. Now, anybody who's done any construction as such knows that there's likely displacement. So tell us and our viewers, how are we planning, or how is Bank of Jamaica planning for those potential displacements, given its critical function to the country?
All right, so you're correct. I mean, there'll be some level of displacement. Now, the good thing about this, though, is that we're doing an expansion, and we're expanding on the eastern side of the building. And so any kind of construction work is really going to be on new ground, so to speak. Not within our existing offices for the most part.
So I did say that BOJ are going with very big things, so the expansion of the Nethersold Place plant. But there was another recent purchase made, a property at 13 Hillcrest Avenue. Why was that property purchased?
Okay, good question. So, like any organization which has to carry out functions that are in the public interest, you really, the board and the management of such an organization really don't have much tolerance for the operations having to be disrupted and discontinued because of a disruption. And so we have a business continuity center here at the bank. We call it our BCC. And it served us well during the pandemic. We had instances where persons were infected, and you would recall those days of contract tracing and deep cleaning and all of that. So we had to vacate our main location to allow for that to happen and to minimize the risk of anybody getting infected with this COVID-19 virus. And we had made a decision early in our journey with COVID-19 to keep our BCC sterile.
Okay.
So we had nobody there.
Okay.
So we felt comfortable relocating critical functions to that BCC. Now that BCC that we have can't accommodate all our mission critical functions.
Okay.
Certainly not our currency operations, where you need a lot of space to be able to carry that out securely.
Okay.
And remember, I said we're the only organization that issues and redeems currency. So from time to time, shipments come in. They have to be delivered to the central bank so that we can then process and issue. Banks from time to time like to bring currency back. This is currency in circulation back to the central bank. We call that process redemption. And of course, again, too, that needs to be carried out securely at the central bank. Well, we can do that here at Nethersole, but at our BCC, which is where you would go to if you had some disruption at Nethersole. And it could be a hurricane, it could be an earthquake, it could be some civil disturbance that prevents people from coming downtown.
Yeah.
The current BCC, we couldn't do any currency operations there.
Okay.
Okay.
So this property that we have acquired is large enough, and the reason why it can't accommodate it is
the size.
The size.
Okay.
It's very small, doesn't have great parking.
Right.
So we needed to resolve those issues. And there was another important factor, which is that, you know, we received information which suggested that the current BCC lies on the very same fault line as our primary location.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So that acquisition was against that background. The need to acquire a property that could accommodate the full range of critical functions that we carry out here at the bank, which we carry out for the benefit of the public at large. All right, so that's important to understand. There's nobody, as I said, there's no other organization that can do the functions set out in law that we carry out.
We have been speaking with Bank of Jamaica's Deputy Governor with responsibility for finance, technology and administration, George Roper. Don't go away. Centrally Speaking will be right back after this break.
Welcome back to Centrally Speaking. We're speaking with George Roper. So, George, Bank of Jamaica has articulated a very ambitious vision of being the world's leading central bank. For the viewer watching, not too familiar with BOJ's operations or central banking internationally, what does world leading look like?
Okay.
And where is BOJ on this very bodacious path?
Right. So, for central banks, there are international standards and best practices that apply to all the different areas of responsibility, you know, that a central bank typically would have. So, for example, price stability is tied to monetary policy, and or responsibilities in relation to promoting financial system stability is tied to supervision.
All right.
So in each of those areas, what we would try to do is to follow international standards. And so that's one of the things that we look to in terms of benchmarking where we are versus this you call it bodacious vision.
Yes.
Right. You know, where are we in terms of international standards? I think ultimately, though, you have to judge us on the basis of effectiveness.
Right.
All right. Are we, you know, are the actions we're taking having the desired results? Are we do we have price stability?
Okay.
And do we have financial system stability, and at what cost are we being efficient?
Right.
In achieving those particular aims and goals. So where we are, it's difficult to say where we are, because world leading, what makes you world leading is something that shifts. I mean, I'll use a track and field analogy. There was a time when if you run a 10 flat in 100 meters, you are world leading.
Yeah. But
That
right
is not
now-
the case right now, right?
Yes.
So I think, we can expect that marker of what is world leading is going to shift over time. But I think it's important that we're continuously striving to be world leading, contributing to the development of Jamaica. So I think that's key as well. You know, whatever we're doing, you know, Jamaica must benefit.
Okay. How does BOJ ensure that their team members are engaged as they coalesce around this very bodacious vision of being a world-leading central bank?
Right. So engagement for us happens along might I call it 6 lanes. Let me stick with the track and field world. 6 lanes. 6 lanes.
Yes.
Right.
And of course, you want to have engaged staff because then they would be motivated.
Yes.
Engagement means that you have this deep emotional connection to the organization, and then that fires up the staff. They're motivated. They want to do well so that the organization itself can do well. So there are these 6 lanes for us. What's the quality of the leadership? That's lane 1.
Right. Right.
All right?
Yes.
What's the quality of the communication? And it should be two-way.
Right.
People must not feel that they're only required to listen to what the leadership is telling them. They must feel that they too
have a voice.
Have a voice, yes, and that they are heard.
Yes.
Right? So communication, or two-way communication, is another lane. Another lane is social well-being. Are we taking care of the overall well-being, you know, physical, the emotional? Are we as an organization catering to those needs that our staff have? And I remember I said the staff are the #1 asset that we have. Building is important, and the equipment that we have is important, and technology that we have is important. None of that is as important as the staff.
Okay.
All right, so we need to be looking after their well-being. And how do they feel? Do they feel that the organization is really taking their social well-being into account? Do they have outlets beyond work to interact with one another? Those are important things.
Okay.
Then you have this thing called line of sight. And really what that is that there is an understanding by our employees as to what are the strategic goals of the organization, what is its mission, what is its vision, and how they fit in with all of that. So it's important that, you know, we, again, part of communication, we make sure that there is that line of sight, that it's not a secret what it is the bank is trying to achieve and striving to achieve. Then you have rewards and recognition. And the rewards, we might say, boy, that is compensation. It is important. But also, going beyond having competitive compensation, you want to know that you are recognizing superlative effort by staff. That staff don't feel that, you know, the extra effort they put out, you know, is kind of just taken for granted. There needs to be recognition. So that's another important lane. And then the final one, which is my favorite one, is an appreciation that the work you do is meaningful work. This is work that, as we say in the vision, contributes to the development
of Jamaica.
And our mission, well, you know, everybody knows vision is what you aspire to be. The mission is what you're supposed to be living out day to day. And our mission statement, you know, there's an important part that we tend to forget, but we are supposed to be formulating and implementing policies that promote price stability and financial system stability by being a trusted organization with motivated and professional employees working for the benefit of the people of Jamaica. Good. So that is mighty awesome.
It is.
I like to say to the staff, listen, Jamaica is an exceptional country. We know all the reasons why. We gave the world Marcus Garvey, Bob Marley, Usain Bolt, and I can stop there, but there's a whole lot more I could talk about. And I say an exceptional country deserves an exceptional central bank.
Yes.
And if you got recruited to work here, you must be an exceptional person.
You hear that, Anna?
So we need people to understand that,
exceptional.
and need people to understand that there is one central bank that the country has, and the work that it does, if it's not done properly, it's impossible for the country to have sustained economic growth and development.
Okay.
So a world-leading central bank, George, requires a world-leading team, and based on the 6 lanes, those are world-leading efforts and in some instances aspirations. Now, I would like to add a 7th lane, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The development of the people. Right. How do you develop or continually develop, redevelop your team so that they have the capacity to meet world leading in terms of financial system stability and price stability?
Right. So there are a number of things that we do. First of all, we have a section in our HR division which is dedicated to what we call talent management.
Okay.
And one part of that talent management team is our talent development team. I suspect that you're not going to find many, if any, other organization in Jamaica that invests as much as we do in terms of talent development, which is training and building up people's capacity to do work. So for the people who are still at university and them have ambition and them want to work with an organization that is going to help them to develop and grow, this is the place to work, especially if you're in economics, if you're in finance, if you're in engineering as well, because we have these facilities that we have to run. Technology, HR, you want to work. This is the place. This is the place to work.
We are speaking with George Roper, Deputy Governor with responsibility for finance, technology and administration. Centrally Speaking will be back after the break.
Welcome back to Centrally Speaking. Here we're taking the key points from our conversation with George Roper, Deputy Governor at Bank of Jamaica with responsibility for finance, technology and administration. So you know how we do it. It's time for the fast facts. Number 1, Bank of Jamaica, BOJ, is expanding its primary location at Nethersall Place, Kingston, to add a 10-story building. Number 2, the expansion will satisfy space requirements for staff complement, its new mandate and functions, and anticipates future growth. Number 3, BOJ implemented an internationally competitive bidding process for the new building. 10 firms submitted bids, of which 7 were local, and a local bidder was selected for the project. Number 4, the estimated cost of the development is $2 billion Jamaica dollars. It is self-funded with no debt involved and at no cost to taxpayers. Number 5, BOJ has also acquired property on Hillcrest Avenue to house its new Business Continuity Center, or BCC, to accommodate the full range of critical functions of the bank. And here's a bonus fact. Hey, assets on BOJ's balance sheet currently total over $1 trillion Jamaica dollars. And in 2024, BOJ paid over $4.66 billion in dividends to its sole shareholder, the Jamaica government. And that's it for today's Fast Facts. And guess what? That's our program for this week.
Follow us on X and Facebook at Central Bank JA, at Central Bank Jamaica on Instagram, and on BOJ's YouTube channel. You can also visit our website at www.boj.org.jm.
And we also invite you to send your questions on X or Facebook.
And of course, tune in again to Centrally Speaking next week at the same time right here on your station when we will have another special guest.
And Sheena, speaking of guests.
Yes.
Yeah, we could big up some people.
Yes. Firstly, we want to big up our guests
who have joined us this season. Our executive producer, Noel Greenland.
Our production crew.
Our research coordinator, Sandra Moody.
And the communications department.
Big them up. Them work hard. Oh
and
my God.
Importantly also, our viewers.
Our viewers. And of course, the world's leading staff at Bank of Jamaica. Big up to you all. I'm Anna.
And I'm Sheena.
Thanks for watching.
Centrally Speaking is a production of Bank of Jamaica.
You're watching CBX Caribbean Business Exchange. Your region, your business, your source.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Jamaica Magazine. I'm your host, Adrian Atkinson. Today we spotlight personal and national empowerment, how Jamaicans can take steps to improve their own lives, and how the nation is strategically planning for a stronger future. From personal development to public health, and from vision boards to visionary policies, these stories reflect the heart of progress in Jamaica. Let's dive into what's shaping our people and our future. The news is next.